Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Odyssey House Journals. I'm Randall Carlisle, your host, Nicole Slack, my co-host. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And we are one of the most watched and listened to podcasts dealing with addiction and recovery. And I guess that's because a lot of people are affected by addiction and recovery, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. More than what you think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Your neighbor, the person you go to church with, you just don't know.
Yeah.
Our guest today is Alex Fredrickson, and I apparently, we were just talking before the podcast, and I apparently met you years ago when I was I'm still in recovery, but when I was fighting for it really hard.
Yeah, I think you were just brand new to it. I think I remember watching you get your either one of the first ones, either 30, 60, or 90-day chip. So you were brand new and fresh. I know.
Well, what were you doing there?
I know, right? It took me multiple more years to catch up to it, but everyone goes through their path and so, but yeah, it was a long time ago the first time that we met you.
It is funny how you meet. Well, when I was going through IOP and when I first got out, I did the 90 meetings in 90 days routine.
Yep.
And I think that works not because the 12-step meetings are so great, but because you don't have time to do anything else. So, But what's funny is you see there's so many people in the recovery community and so many people going to meetings like that I bet I could throw a dart at AA meeting list and go to that meeting that day, and there'd be somebody there I know.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I've heard a lot in the meetings. What's really cool is how they break it down on that 90 and 90 is if you break it down by day, because it's so hard, especially in that first little bit, to stay sober. Your mind is just obsessed with it. So if you break it down, and if you're lucky enough to have a job, then that's 8 hours of the day right there. Okay. Right. And then your average sleep time, there's another 8 hours. Okay. So now you've already knocked out 16 hours of the day. So you only have 8 hours left to try and get through that. So if you can do 2 or 3 meetings and then you go and get coffee, or you go to Denny's after and get that, then you can string along a day of sobriety, and then you just do that for 3 months in a row. And then before you know it, you got that 90 and 90. So, I've heard a number of different varying opinions about that, of how it works and how it doesn't. But, to me, and I'm a numbers guy, so it definitely makes sense, if you break it down like that.
It does when you look at it like that. Yeah. And that's the way I looked at it. And my sponsor told me, don't question it, just do it.
Yep.
And I said, okay, because nothing else worked.
Nothing else. Yep.
So, and I really didn't have time to do, because you got to consider getting to and from the meetings, and any like paying bills or doing laundry or anything else that average people do, and your day is shot. So, I couldn't think about a drink because I didn't have time.
Yeah. And again, you're definitely one of the lucky ones if you have a job. I was not one of the lucky ones, and I think I lost, countless jobs, obviously, but that was not something that I could rely on at that point. And I think that's the really challenging part with people in brand new sobriety, is they're looking for that thing to fill in the schedule, right? And so they're looking for either, the job, of course, because money is the biggest issue, but just finding that community is so important. And so by kind of immersing yourself, whether it's AA or there's, fortunately we're in a time, me and my wife were actually chairs of that group here called YPR, Young People in Recovery.
Sure.
And so we chaired the Salt Lake City chapter for actually during the pandemic, which was quite an interesting experience, because we went from really full meetings and a lot of community, a lot of events and stuff like that, to Zoom calls, and we'd go to meetings that there was, me and her and maybe one other person, all en masse.
Right.
But we still sat there and we still shared our story for 20, 30 minutes at a time. And we got a lot out of it. And we just, as everyone knows, you just had to do what you could do during that time.
So describe how your addiction began and how long it lasted and how you got through it.
So like I was sharing right before we started, mine was up until I was 17, I had never touched a drug, drink, alcohol, anything. I was a perfect 4.0 student. I played a ton of sports. And then I blew my knee out playing basketball for the high school team my senior year. And the surgery, of course, they give you pain pills. And I'll never forget the first couple times that I took it, and my mom saying, you got to be careful with those because they're very, very addictive and people can have some serious problems with it. And me being the young, arrogant athlete is like, oh, Mom, I'm fine. Don't worry about it.
Sure. At that age, you're always
Of course.
fine.
Yeah. Everyone knows everything, right?
Won't happen to me.
Yes, exactly. And then I also shared with you guys that my mom and my dad were alcoholics. And so I am 100% convinced that I had that gene, within me from day one.
Sure.
And so as soon as those pain pills hit and that first, kind of rush, it was kind of just, the demon unleashed. And then after that, it wasn't like a complete just downfall, free for all on anything that I could get. It was definitely a slow moving process after that. I still played sports. I went to Salt Lake Community College, but it was always there. And just like you always hear, it just slowly progressed. And it was more and more and more. And it was the more intense, and it was more intense. And this was when Oxycontin just came out, and it was a really, really big.
Your timing was great.
It was great. It was great. So I got
prescriptions easy to get.
It was. They were everywhere, and I don't think I know that no one really knew how dangerous they actually were.
Except the people who made them.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. And so that was a big part of my story was a lot of those in large amounts. And I had some really successful things at a young age. I started a carpet cleaning business, and so I had a lot of money for an early 20-year-old that fueled that addiction. And that is how we were able to do so much work is, using substances to kind of get through going and cleaning carpets. And then, my addiction got the better of me on that. I had to sell my half. And again, with my dad being an alcoholic, he was in sobriety at this point. So was my mother. And AA was such a big thing for him. And he took me to so many meetings, and I just wasn't ready. And I tried to appease him, but just like you hear all the time, like I wasn't even close to being done, and I had to go through all these hard things, and so it just kept progressing, and I was able to have decent jobs. I worked in the hospitality business for quite a bit. I ran a moving company as the team lead for quite a while, but it was just always there. Fortunately, I don't know how I was able to stay out of like really big trouble. Like I never went to jail.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. One of the few. I should have gone to jail multiple times. I was just one of the fortunate ones that didn't end up. So that is not part of my story, but it was just, I think that kind of fueled my arrogance even more, because it's like, well, if I'm not getting caught, then I can get away with more, let's push the limits. And so, and it just kept progressing from there. And then in 2017, I actually got back together. So my wife, who's sitting here, she and I met each other a really long time ago, right when I was doing the carpet cleaning thing, and we dated for a little bit, kind of parted ways. And then the universe kind of, put our paths back together. And so in 2017, we were all of a sudden together for, every single minute of the day. And her drug of choice was alcohol, and mine was everything else. And so
you should have gotten along.
I know it's match made in heaven. And so
or hell.
It turned to hell really quick. It looked like heaven for a little bit, but so our paths crossed, and unfortunately, like I I saw what alcohol was doing to her, and me wanting to help her get away from that. The only thing I could do was turn her to what I knew. And so she had never seen the ugly dark side of drugs. And so I introduced her to that. And so we ran amok for a good 2.5 years. And, you know, losing absolutely everything, destroying every relationship, losing all the jobs, every single, you know, devious thing under the sun was done. And then we finally reached that point, and that was 2019. And we finally said enough is enough. We were practically homeless. I was squatting at her dad's office that had no power, no water, no toilet. It was pretty much, you know, just this random shack up in Mill Creek. And it was just like, we were done finally. And so through some friends that she knew, we got set up with detox, and she went to one treatment center, and then I went to Odyssey, and we got sober at our separate places and did the whole sober living voucher and all that. And we went, you know, separate paths, and then we got back together, and both of us just celebrated our 5 years of sobriety in May.
Wow.
So it's one of those rare stories. It's not, I always tell people, it's definitely not the best route to go. And the odds are not in the favor of it working out. When you have a past like that,
The odds are really against
it's
you.
really against it. We have a couple of friends in our group of recovery people that have done the same. But it really is, it's few and far between that it works out, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason with us, it has worked out. We've
Of course, he
actually,
has to say that. His wife is sitting here watching this podcast being recorded. So
It has
So
been-
even if he were having an argument, you wouldn't be saying
exactly.
that. now,
Yes.
see? So-
No, it's been, and again, 2019 of May is when we got sober. And then, so not even a year later, the whole world shuts down, and the pandemic is here, and isolation, which is, absolutely the fuel for a lot of people's addiction.
Sure.
And so we had to rely on each other through that, and through the little groups that we had. YPR was really, really big. Of course, AA, I have a sponsor, she has a sponsor. We've done the steps, like we've done everything that's suggested, but we've leaned on each other quite a bit through all this time. And again, it doesn't always work out like that, but for whatever reason it did for us, and here we are today.
It strikes me as you were sort of a bad guy turning her on to.
I was a really bad guy.
She's just an alcoholic, and you're turning her into a drug addict.
I know.
Why did you do that?
Man, if I could go back and change it, like all that I could think of was, I saw alcohol is such a scary one. I mean, all of them are scary. There's none that are better than others. But what it was doing to her was literally, threatening her life. And so it was like, what's the less evil here, And so the couple scares that we had with the alcohol, it was so bad where the doctor was like, you're not going to live continuing this.
Wow.
So it wasn't my intention to just, throw her into that, but because of my actions and my addiction had me by a stranglehold, that it was just a byproduct of her being around it. And again, it was kind of one of those situations where with it being so new to her, it was kind of like seeing, I had already been through my addiction for 18 years, at this point.
That's how long you...
And so, yeah, well, I mean, if I started when I was 17 and now I'm 41, so it had been about, 16, 17 years of dealing with that. And I was already at my wit's end, but when you bring someone else that you really, that you love into it, unfortunately, like you kind of see the excitement of what the whole thing is. And so I was living vicariously through her excitement on all of it, as weird as that sounds, like that's really what it was. And so that's what kind of fueled those couple of years. And then just like it happens with everything else, it comes crashing down. And it came crashing down for both of us and both of our families. My family had been done with me for quite a while. Hers followed suit pretty fast. And again, it was us and we held on to everything, as long as we possibly could and made a very valiant effort to keep it going as long as we possibly could. But when we were finally, at that breaking point, there was no other option. And so we finally gave into it and went the route that, fortunately there's a lot of resources today for people to get help. Especially people that are in that situation, with Medicaid and stuff like that of how many treatment options are actually available.
Sure.
I've talked to a lot of people that were friends with my dad. My dad actually passed away in 2011. That was another part that really fueled my addiction. But he passed away the day of his funeral was his 25th year of sobriety.
Wow.
And so he was a Salt Lake City firefighter. And so his funeral had the entire Salt Lake City Fire Department, and then all of my family, of course, and then a bunch of AA people. And you know a lot of them, but one of them, she brought a chip and put it, on the pedestal.
Wow.
And it was actually so. But talking to some of his friends and people that have been around forever, they're really, really happy with what's happened with the whole recovery, community, with the resources that are actually available to people. Because back in the day, AA was the only thing on the block. And the hospitals and institutions, they'd throw you there and then they'd say, go to an AA meeting, and that's all you had. Right. Now there's just, there's so many different options. There's so many different groups that it's encouraging because it's such a big problem. And we're only scratching the surface of it, but at least there are a lot of options available.
One of the biggest changes I've seen is Medicaid expansion.
Yep.
And that took groups like providers and it took all the experts saying to the state legislature, we've got to expand Medicaid because there are people that aren't getting the help they need.
Yeah.
And they finally capitulated. But we were one of the last states to expand Medicaid coverage to cover something like addiction treatment.
Yep.
And it's too bad that we were so slow on that. But now, I think almost all across America, people can get Medicaid assistance for treatment.
Yeah.
Which it's sort of like one of those things you say, duh.
Yeah.
Well, because if you're not paying for treatment, you're paying for jail and you're paying for cops and you're paying for all the crime stuff that happens.
Yep.
And so it just makes sense.
It does. And it's the hardest part is knowing that it's available. But again, like what I said with my story, just because it's available doesn't mean that people are ready to do it.
No.
And that's, unfortunately, people have to go through what they're going to go through until they're at that breaking point. And then even then, and they give it a shot, relapse is a big part. It's a huge part of my story too. You don't always get it the first time. And so it's just, man, it's such a tough thing. And so our biggest thing since we've been sober, these 5 years is trying to give back as much as possible. Going to treatment centers. I mean, I brought that YPR group into Odyssey House many times.
Right.
And just, whatever we can do to kind of pass the message along that you can get through it. It's really hard. It sucks. It's a terrible disease. There's not a more powerful disease on this planet, but you can get through it. And it's just, and the support is there. You just gotta ask.
Nicole, she deals directly with, what's your title? Client experience coordinator.
Okay.
So she deals with a lot of our clients, and some succeed and some don't. Mm-hmm. And in your observation, would you agree with what he just said, that the people who do succeed really want to succeed, or?
yeah, I think the people that succeed want to, and then they work at it every day and give back something.
Yeah.
But side note is that YPR helped me so much when I was in Odyssey.
Really?
I can remember being like, now I'm an addict and I have to be an addict for the rest of my life. This will be fun. And then YPR came and they just said, you can say you're a person in long-term recovery.
Yep.
And I was like,
Yep.
I can handle that.
Yeah.
So YPR gave me hope when I was like, oh no, like now I'm this forever. And yeah, you guys gave me a lot of hope.
It's such a great program. And I got to give a shout out to just barely, they went to the national convention and Salt Lake City won chapter of the year for the entire nation. So yeah, my good buddy Adam Baxter is the chairperson now, and he's doing a great job. And
He's actually the one that came and did it.
did he?
So,
yeah, there you go. Yeah,
And that made a difference to you.
Yeah. I just remember,
Just because of the label?
because I wasn't expecting to be in rehab. So then it was like, oh, now I'm in rehab. And then it was like, now I'm an addict for the rest of my life. And just dealing with all those feelings of like, just being defeated, like, this is me now. And then Adam Baxter came and did a speech with us and he talked to us and just, it's not the end of the world and I'm not the worst human ever. I'm just a person who dealt with something and is recovering and working on it. And so, yeah, it was really cool.
that's so awesome to hear. Yeah, it's just, and we've seen that same exact, kind of light in people's eyes. There's such a strong stigma in addiction and alcoholism across the board. But especially like this state can have a little bit of stronger opinions towards it. And so if you go in and you say that I'm an addict, I'm a recovering addict, I'm a recovering alcoholic, whatever it is, and you say those words, you get an immediate wall put up.
Yes.
And that wall might not ever get broken depending on who you're talking to.
You're a bad person.
You're going to get prejudged the second, even that you're an awesome person, you like beat it and like people don't care. They hear that word and they attach it to all the bad things that we've grown up thinking that word describes.
Yeah.
So by saying you're a person in long-term recovery, it's a little softer, right? And it's like recovery could be a number of different things and people are willing to give you a chance.
Yeah.
And that's all it is, know? And it's like exactly what you said. You're not labeled something right off the bat and people aren't going to judge you from just, that one phrase of how you, define yourself. So,
Yeah.
or introduce yourself, I should say.
Well, yeah, I think I was defining myself with it though.
Were you?
So like,
Okay.
that's it. I'm an addict.
Yep.
And so I don't know, you guys taught me to
interesting.
say it different and it just felt different.
Well, that's awesome. That makes me feel great.
I had the hardest time saying I was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And even in 12-step meetings, you hear people say, I'm Randall and I am trying to cut back on drinking or something, as opposed to, and the first couple of times I tried to say it, it was like, I'm Randall, I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
It's because it does have negative connotations. My alcoholism runs in my family too. And my mother told me when I was young, and the first time she caught me drinking, that you got to be careful because you could become an alcoholic because it just runs through generation after generation of my family.
Yeah.
But my image of an alcoholic was a bum sitting on the street corner with a brown bag, not somebody like Nicole, my God. Or me, not me either.
Well, and that's that's what society and Hollywood and the media. That's kind of what they've instilled, as what that is. That it's a homeless person, it's under the bridge, with the brown bag. Like that's the picture that we put in our heads growing up, and that's all that we know. And so that word addict and alcoholic is so strong, and like how you described it, that it defines you. That can be a really hard thing to overcome with you, like self-confidence, even as successful as you may or may not be. And you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic. you think differently about yourself, even though you shouldn't, just by saying those words, to yourself, whether or not you're saying it out loud. So it's a big way to, to just shift the mindset, shift the way that you think about yourself, how you introduce yourself. And we've seen a lot of success, not that there's anything against AA, and we're pretty strong about, supporting that. AA has helped more people than anything else, hands down, and it will continue to do that. And so it's nothing against AA, but shifting, that verbiage and just kind of, tweaking a little things can have a huge impact on people's success rate with this thing.
I think it changes the perspective. I think that addict people automatically assume you're going to mess up for the rest of your life. Like there's no way you're overcoming this, is the vibe I get when you say I'm an addict and people are like, oh. And so,
oh, I'm so sorry.
And so it's just changing the perspective, and I love that.
Yeah,
you guys have done an awesome job.
But the reality is, it's something you're going to have to deal with all your life. Yeah.
I think though now it feels more manageable. That like I'm just recovering from something that's not who I am.
Yeah,
I'm just recovering.
Yeah, yeah. And that's been my experience too. I mean, obviously, having strung together a couple days now, the obsession is removed, right? But I am not naive for a second to think that it's not still there. And that's the scary part about this disease, is that it can creep up in so many different ways, and just impose its will at the most unbelievable times. And so it is a daily battle, but it's made me who I am today. I truly believe that everything that happened for a reason, and I would not be the person I am today if it wasn't for everything that I went through, all the good, bad, and ugly.
That's true of all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've heard a claim, and maybe it's just to justify our existence and our past bad deeds, that people who are in recovery from addiction are some of the strongest people around, because it's such a difficult thing to overcome.
Without a doubt. I would 100%.
You would agree?
With that. Yep.
Yeah, but see, you're one of those. How about you, Nicole?
I sure hope so.
Yeah. There you go. No, you know what? I think that's true, because like when you describe the demon that sits within, and it is, people who are not addicted to any substances have trouble understanding that.
Yeah. Yeah. And they always
mean, if I have one drink, I'm going to have 20? Why? Couldn't you just say no?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it's, I think, again, like what I was saying earlier, the awareness and like the understanding is becoming more and more, across the board. Whereas back in the day, it was a very strong stigma, and it was just this one categorization of how things were, right? And so now there's so much knowledge and so much information available that people are finally starting to understand that it's like you wouldn't judge someone that has cancer or diabetes. Like, it's literally a disease that's within us.
Yeah.
We don't want to ruin our lives. We don't want to do all these terrible things and destroy our families and cause all this wreckage. Like, we really don't want to, just like a cancer patient doesn't want to lose, their hair and go through all those terrible things. So it really is similar. Like the way of like how the disease progresses, is much different. And so I'm not saying that they're exactly the same, but I think finally the awareness is getting to the point where people are a little bit more understanding than at least what they used to be.
I agree.
I think we have a long way to go still. And then, and that's when groups like what I was talking about are a big, big part of it.
Well, you've helped just with this podcast, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
Alex Fredrickson, thanks. I appreciate you being here. Nicole, good to see you again.
You too.
You're not a bad person. Thank you for watching or listening to another edition of Odyssey House Journals.